Welcome back. So I was looking around, trying to figure if there's some like pre-existing model of a globe, a sphere object, not necessarily Earth. So I started looking at Jupiter, at like atmosphere of Jupiter because that's what we can see. Just going by what we can see, and to get basically to see if I can find something that kind of mimics this to get a sort of bearing on the potential of this. So, let's just go like this. That pursuit brought me here. Okay. I'm out a little. Okay. Probably should have these opposite. Or just move me. Where am I? Where am I? I'm fine. Okay. So right now we're looking at air, wind, and different heights. So this is really high up, surface winds, but then high up. So noticeably high up, it's got a general thing here that's almost like a something that the winds like run into, and like a more stable structure that they end up just wrapping around at that point. Maybe just higher density. I might be. Or just like an eye of a storm, I guess. I don't know exactly, but in essence, they have one of these, one of these, and that kind of made me think of this. So I'm like, maybe something of that nature. So let's just keep looking around. Not to say that this is identical, but just to get like a bearing. So like, there's a current going this way that relative to this structure this way, like this portion especially separates. So like here, this kind of has like a separator in the currents in the structure, if this is mimicking it, kind of thing. And then the currents have like some hard boundary here. They kind of wrap around, down, up, up, run into some kind of structure. So this one's not quite as precise as I would like it to be. Okay. Here's another one that's kind of got like a pole with a like 1, 2, 3, like wrapping, like a wrapping arc kind of thing. That's maybe reminiscent of this, like especially here, maybe. Just to now at this height, 70 HPA, so the pressure, we see a different type of structure, but it's kind of like a, instead of being 1, 2, 3, it has more just 1, 2 at this structure here. But then opposing to it is a really solid, like big island kind of shape thing going on. And then in the middle, so pretty much we're looking at the top, we're seeing a feature similar to this. We're looking at the bottom, we're seeing a feature similar to this. And then therefore between it, this stretch, looks like there's one going this way and one, maybe. This stretch, generally speaking, is here, where this portion probably is more attached to here. Maybe I'm mistaken. One second. I'm good if you come. Okay. Thank you. Bye. Love you. Okay. So essentially, making it more plausible. Let's keep looking. This is real interesting because now what was once a defined polygonal boundary that didn't have currents coming into the boundary actually at a lower elevation have inlets where the boundary like breaks down and current's able to actually, generally speaking, flow across it enough to create these like changes in the current, seemingly, although it really doesn't seem to be flowing across it, but it must be in order to create this. Let's see if if we go a little different, if the currents become more. Now they're still really rapping. Rippity rap rap. Okay, let's keep looking at this though. So like almost like a volcano and a volcano. This one has a mass on it. This one has no mass on it, maybe, or vice versa. I'm only saying that because of the mass of Antarctica. Although maybe Antarctica, by existing, like emits heat, or one of them emits like into the atmosphere more than the other by being a different material that maybe is reminiscent of Mauna Kea versus Mauna Loa, where there's some like difference in them, but they're still generally part of like the lower half of the sphere that has a generally like triangular square type shape, especially visible here. Crazy at this one, it turns into like a straight up ammonite structure, spirals out, out, spirals out here, keeps going across here, out here, I guess, just moving up, then spiraling maybe into here. Nope. Running into it though, which is running into, and then this portion spiraling the other way. They're flowing the same direction here and here. Yeah. Okay, so if we kind of interpret this as this region, let's see how this is. At this point, it's just crazy complex. Does not really mimic this in the same way here. This is almost like the top and bottom at this height are like almost to the center, to the point where it's just like uniform and like fast currents everywhere. Like there's probably some exact height that this even extends further and just creates like a more of a uniform currents everywhere. Where like here it's much more at the top and bottom. Here it's much more at the top and bottom, but here it's certainly crossing between them. Like rapidly. I mean, not exact, of course. We're not getting exact, especially across many dimensions when I'm comparing it to one. But we're seeing enough similarities that it really is plausible. Like the way it has these kind of like up down bumps. That's going on a lot of the time. A lot of places where there's like indentations upward into the upper currents. Like kind of like here. I'll just go up into it and then out of it generally. So that's going on. That's going on down here too. Wherever exactly the boundary may be in a way that's reminiscent of here. Probably this one. So I would say this is what I'm thinking is actually I was saying 15 here. This is the pole, but it's because of the way it's shaped. But I'm realizing that's not the case because I feel really strongly like this was a pole. Uh, if like the structure really had a pole. It was here, and then like it doesn't really make sense for like this would be back at the equator, so it doesn't really make any sense for that to be a pole. But the kind of opposite is Mauna Loa, so I'm really feeling like that's probably a pole. Like those are two poles. One of them is hot, one of them is cold. This one gets lots of water, rain. This one has lots of uh, eruptions and magma within it. Something of that nature, and then this like wrapped over beyond the pole, like this was like Greenland and Iceland maybe approaching an equator, and then this isn't the actual equator. That this is more like the equator, and these like somehow were connected in a more reasonable way. So this isn't even like drawn at the equator, I guess. Like the equator would probably be more angled from here to over here, maybe. If we're going from here to here to like the actual poles of the sphere being the here and here, then the the lines I drew aren't actually relevant to the like actual final product or anything. It's just generally showing that they broke apart in like a what lays out as having like a 90-degree thing going on here in enough of a way where it seems like it is related to its geometry because it was a sphere and etc. So I thought I'd update on that because this seemed worth like drawing attention to. Let's see if we get any more. It just hides the just hides it all. Okay. Just the way it does that. There's a current going above it, up and around it. Okay, look at this. 1, 2, 3. Right? 1, 2, 3. 1. I'm wondering if it's holding the shape below it by being like outer pillars that are it's within at a lower elevation. I don't know. It seems not quite to fit that though. False alarm. Like this is generally very much in the same location. So it's almost like this current that's rotating around here really is rotating around some sort of pillar type structure that's naturally exists there in the currents. That's here, here maybe, or here, a little over, and then a little over, and a little over still. It's not exactly up down relative to the surface of the Earth. Moves a little over still. Really, it's still through them all, so it's like a pillar through the atmosphere, straight through. Every layer generally is rotating around this. Which I guess is that one kind of. That one. This structure. Around this, it's just making me think that it puts like a current this way that falls downward. Like this current is flowing into like this well of this pillar where there's less current. So it kind of like falls off maybe to fill like a jar. So as it goes down to a lower level, it like fills, but then it spans out into that like space that it's able to fill, like a basin, to create a polygonal boundary around it at that elevation. It's not there at this elevation. Even though there's this polygonal boundary, there's not this polygonal boundary. Almost like a cave system. And it's creating this here, and I guess over here there's not as much, so it's like falling off like a waterfall off the side of this like mound of just wind, of current. This mound of current, it falls off the side. And depending on how like all the things going on down there, it just starts flowing back that way, I guess, to fill that space, and just meeting resistance over here from this region, which is really flowing at that depth or height. Either or, same thing. Different but same. Then that creates kind of a boundary here, I guess, which then current flows along the boundary. So maybe like that, there's a basin forming here, and a basin forming here produces a boundary that really, like, in the stabilization of it all, like, encourages a boundary current, a current along the boundary, which then feeds into one of them and seems to, like, extract from this one, because this one really is being fed from like the top of this mountain peak of this current all the way up to here. Like this mountain peak is feeding a current into like a well there. Maybe this mountain peak, this absolute mountain peak, then it's like maybe even like, I don't know. I'm just focusing on this kind of polygonal closed off region and how it changes. Once it starts to branch out here, it's a little like, it's almost like it taps into the North Pole through an arm from this like node of currents that's like from the ground upward, because we see it all the way here. Up through. Let's watch over here. Maybe we kind of see one there too. Up through. I mean, it's kind of moving over a bit. So maybe this one is fed from like here down that way into this region, causing a resistance to like slow it down and cause like a downwelling there. Then it like spirals, especially there, and goes up here and participates in shaping this. I just got distracted, but it seems to be flowing, so why not? Like maybe this is also a place where it's upwelling and not downflowing. I don't know. I might be mistaken. It seems like it's flowing into, like it's physically draining into a basin that's like got a pressure underneath it and a current around it that keeps like a structure to it, but then anything that falls within it flows underneath the current around it largely and branches out in ways. But the pillars remain at the like stable nodes pretty strongly. And as we approach the surface, we really see the wind slow down over top Antarctica. So maybe it's highly tied to the presence of Antarctica, where this is highly tied to the like a protected spot for currents to just flow downward from space through this like channel down from like the highest of the atmosphere that then drains at different layers like a complex cave network. Let's see if we can find like a not a real one, but like a graphic maybe. I don't know. Something downward though, like actually down. Kind of like this, I guess. That's good. That's probably good. Down to some basin where it like gets like held within, but it can continue to flow. Even though in this instance it has a drop, it stopped, but like it continues. It just has like a continuous source of uh, from above that's then refilling the polygon enough to keep its shape and all. Pretty much to push it, probably to push it out. So like it almost would want to just be like closed in as much as possible. But this inflowing material that then drops down through the layers is held up enough to just like push out the boundary and then flow out like a cave network. Underground lake, drainage point probably also in those kind of situations. Some kind of river that flows on the surface, kind of like this. Whereas like these points, it's going through the surface down into the layers. This is on the surface and many layered, like because it's a very immense current. Like this is also still kind of here, like on this layer, but it changes a bit because it's not exactly the same current. It's because it's kind of like a complex cave network. Here we see one of those like waterfalls, like here. Just from here down through the waterfall to here, down to here, down, 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 down. Or up. I'm sorry if I'm backwards on that. It's possible I'm saying it backwards and not thinking it through or aware of the nuances. Well, actually, I mean, if it's cold air, it should, like, sink. So it kind of makes sense that it would sink here and it would rise here. So, like, these maybe would be upwellings where there's blue. And maybe it's not like it's differentiated because it's just a matter of if it's going in this plane or in this plane, and this shows the motion. Although it would probably be differentiated by whether or not it's a positive or negative. Like swirling into would be a negative, like downward, like from here. So this should swirl into this if it's a draining into. Whereas if it were to be flowing out of, it would swirl out of it. It's so hard to say sometimes. It looks like it's going around at a certain boundary that it's like safe, and then it's like past the event horizon. It kind of flows down the drain, and then along a boundary of this like overall polygon, so it doesn't just like flow out into an open space. It physically flows along a wall like here kind of thing that then flows downward, maybe even causing like these, I don't know, through here. Really through here, but also maybe branching off this way and feeding over here. Especially because it started over there. So it's still actually feeding this way. This is like a side current maybe, and the main upper current that's going downward is actually going more here. So it's more feeding into this arc, which is highly reminiscent of structures on Earth. Looks like it has a first flow this way and then a second flow generally back the same way that are colliding, creating this space. So back to Hawaii, like it's highly plausible that we can look at Earth currents then and see like yeah, it did shape that way. And maybe even like around Maui, like the seamount is more like this shape, and then lower in the seamount is more like this shape, and lower is more like this shape, and lower is more like this shape until it's standing on like a support pillar and not even as big as it initially was back here. Like once it got to like a maximum like size, like that's the peak size of it. And then as we drop down, it has like more matrix surrounding it that's just not as strong of currents, so it's not holding it together as well. But it's still like a seamount. So it's kind of more like a diamond towards the tip where there's like a connection point between the layers that goes through, but looks kind of like this. Particle with a layer and then another layer beneath of just the earth, pretty much, and then a matrix that is a seamount that like extends outward, but it's made of a substantially different material than like the nucleus, which then only has like a point and a point really that the system's touching, because this is like where the current drained down through and wrapped around in some type of way. Maybe not in this instance, maybe up through, or this might have been moving, but in the case of here, although at that point, if it's draining down, maybe that would explain it, why there's a particle there, because like there's a, basically there is an overlayer lying on top of and compressing a part, like a region compressing this, and then maybe the currents are flowing around it, but because it's held in position by the overlayer and the underlayer, it just sits there as it's compressed, with currents flowing around it also that then shape it more spherically, like kind of like Hawaii. And then in Hawaii's instance, it broke apart like a boulder can, and literally it's just the components of the boulder with like the peaks pointing up at the top and the internal part of the boulder at the top, and then the external at the bottom. Okay, so with those things said and added, I'll be back when I got some more cool stuff to add. Hopefully this isn't getting too long-winded. See you soon.